I'm TechShider and welcome to my YouTube channel. And I will share the part 2 of laptop repair tutorial, which was requested by our loyal viewers.
I'm going to do a motherboard replacement here on a HP DV6000. Here's what happens when we press the power. Nothing on the screen. And we get a couple of beeps there. Now it could be an error code. You can check that on the HP's website, see what 4 beeps mean. But we already did that, and we tried replacing the RAM, and it's definitely a motherboard problem. So since we already did a motherboard replacement on DV6000, I'm just going to do this one in fast motion. You might be able to get something out of it because I'm doing it from a different angle. If you were planning on taking apart a DV6000 and you missed something in the first video, this will work for you. So I'm just going to speed it up right now. Okay, like I pulled that RAM out, I wanted to show you that we did try replacing the RAM. It still could have been a RAM problem, but with the new RAM in, it did the same thing. So let's pull the front keyboard off, then get that hinge cover plate off, which has those 2 stingy LCD cables attached to it. Pull off the hinges there, get the screen off. Then we realize we forgot to take the wireless antenna off and the webcam cord, which we should have done in the first place before we tried to pull the screen off. Now there's a few more screws here on the top plate to get off before we can detach it from the bottom plate. And we got to get all the screws out of the bottom plate before we detach it from the top plate. Now if you look at that little pile I'm amassing of screws, most of them are the same size. And this is the part of the DV6000 that is a little tricky. There's those 2 standoffs that are keeping the 2 plates together. Definitely watch the first video to see about that. Okay, there's the motherboard. Just look for all the screws with the white arrows next to them. That should be able to give you enough indication of what screws to take out of the motherboard. Okay, let's take the processor CPU fan off. Let's get the processor out of there. Take a new motherboard, pull it out of the case, and that was the wrong motherboard, so I'm going to pull the correct motherboard out of the case. We're going to reattach the CPU, the fan, and the heatsink. Yeah, I had 2 motherboards sitting over there. I accidentally pulled the wrong one, but it's a blooper. But this one is the correct motherboard. And HP's on the motherboard, right under the RAM, they have the model number, and you want to eBay. If you're doing a buying on eBay, you want to do an eBay search for that model number. That'll give you the exact motherboard that you need. Make sure you reattach all the LCD or all the cables, the ribbon cables. Get those standoffs back on. Reattach all the screws. Attach the screen while you're holding it gently. Put all the screws back in. And tighten them up with a higher torque screwdriver because you don't want these to get loose. The screws that hold the monitor on. Man, I wish I could really do laptop repairs this fast in real life. Okay, you got to feed those wireless antenna through the little gap that was created there under the keyboard. Same thing for the webcam cord here. Make sure everything's flush so the keyboard doesn't have any lumps when you put it back on. It all has to go back properly. It's all nice and even. Now we can put this, start to reattach these ribbon cables. These are important ribbon cables. They control the power board on the hinge cover plate there. The power button and those LED lights. The quick launch, I think they're called. Make sure all the screws are in. Let's throw that keyboard in. The hinge cover plate back on. Start to put all the stuff back in the bottom. The wireless card. Reattach the wireless antenna. It's a wireless N. They have 3 antennas on a wireless N card. Okay, we're going to slow it back down to normal speed right at the end here just to see what the final result's going to be. going to throw this last cover on, which covers the RAM and the wireless card. 2 screws holding that in. Put the battery back in. Hit the power button. Wait to see what happens. Hope we get the HP BIOS screen. Okay, we're going to do a keyboard replacement here on a Gateway laptop. It is a model number W340UI. You can see a couple keys are missing here. The way to get the keyboard off is to remove that top plate right under the screen. What I do is take a flathead screwdriver, I pry it off right at the hinges, but a smart thing to do first is, well, of course, take the battery out, and then check to see if there's any screws on the underside of the computer holding in that plate. I'm going to zoom in here to give you a better view. And it looks like there's a couple screws, one there and one there, that could possibly be holding that plate in. So if we try to pry it off, it might not come off if the screws are still in. So let's just get those screws out. And then there's 2 more screws that could possibly be holding that plate in. But most likely they're holding the hinges in. There's 2 other holes there. But so we'll try to pry the plate off. If it doesn't come off, we'll try removing those other screws. One way to do it is get right under the hinge with a flathead screwdriver and just kind of jiggle the plate and see if it comes off. If it comes off easily, you know you got all the screws out. And yes, there were 2 screws holding that in. Now we have easy access to the keyboard. There's usually screws on the top of the keyboard, or it just flops over like that. I'm going to show you a close-up here of the actual ribbon connector and the ribbon cable. Just push those 2 sides. Usually that's what all you have to do to get the keyboard ribbon out. Now we got a new keyboard here. And you push the ribbon back in. The new keyboard. Sometimes it's easier to do it while the keyboard's laying flat like that. Whatever's easiest. Those cables are not very long usually. I'm going to zoom back in here. You push that cable in and you clamp one side down and clamp the other side down. If you have nails, great. If not, use a screwdriver or preferably something non-metal. And push the keyboard back down flush. If there's no screws holding it in, then just replace the plate and the plate will hold it down. Make sure that the LCD cable is not in the way of that hinge cover. Make sure it fits over it just the way you got it off. Sometimes it could be a little tough getting these plates back on just perfectly, but they should snap in exactly the way they snapped off. Just make sure those cables are okay, not in the way. Everything looks okay. It might have been a tight fit in there in the first place, so that might be why it's not working. Okay, there we go. Went on smooth. It's a good idea to have the battery out because since you're putting this plate back on, your fingers are all over the power button. You don't want it to keep turning on and off. Make sure it's flush and level. Then we're going to flip it around, put 2 screws back in. And that's how easy a keyboard replacement is. Keyboards are very easy. And that's how you do a keyboard replacement on a Gateway laptop. This is a laptop repair we're going to attempt on a Sony Vaio laptop. Now I say attempt because I don't know exactly what's wrong with this thing, and I don't know if we're going to be able to fix it, but we're going to try. If anybody's watching live, you might be at one of two places watching this live. You're either at podnuts.com/laptop videos, or you're at ustream.tv/channel/podnuts. Now, if you're at ustream.tv/channel/podnuts, you could log on with your Ustream name. If you want to join us in the chat room, you're going to see that we have a chat room going on. We do that every live show. And even I embedded the chat room also on the podnuts.com website page, so if you're watching there, you can see the chat room too. If you want to join the chat room, I think you're going to need to log on to Ustream or get a Ustream account, which is free. So, or you could just jump in as a Ustreamer. You're anonymous. You're just called a Ustreamer in the chat room. So feel free to chime in. Keep it nice, keep it clean, and let's see what we can do here today. This computer was sent to me from a Podnuts listener who was having trouble with it. He doesn't even know I'm doing this, actually. I'm not going to read his name, but let's just call him Jack. And he sent a note with this laptop, and here's what the note says. I spoke to you about the Sony Vaio laptop. I mentioned this was giving to me with a damaged LCD. Okay, so he replaced the LCD. When he was 90% done with the laptop, he was having a problem with the internal wireless being recognized in the device manager, but still not being able to use it to connect to a wireless network. I proceeded to take another look under the keyboard to see if I loosened a wire or a card was loose. Everything seemed intact, but after reconnecting the keyboard, I was unable to power up the laptop. I have tried the power switch with and without the battery, but get no response. I was hoping you could take a look and resolve the problem. Okay, so it doesn't power on now. That's the problem with this thing. Well, let's just test it here and make sure that his diagnosis is correct. You never know what could happen in the mail when you send these things. It might have bumped back into place. This thing might work, and then that would be a real short repair video, wouldn't it? Whoa, what is going on here? Well, I wasn't sure if you knew, but your battery's cracked. Cracked battery. So let's keep the battery out for now. Oh no, that's not the battery. That's not the battery. I'm sorry. This is the AC adapter. AC adapter's cracked. Well, that's a shame because we need to use the AC adapter. See, I don't know if this happened in the mail or not. That's why I don't like shipping things, laptops in the mail. But let's see what happens here. You might see a spark or two. Test the voltage. The little green light lights up on the plug there. Okay, let's test the voltage. We take the black on the outside rim and the red on the inside. We set our voltmeter to trying to get it so you guys can see the voltmeter. Set the voltmeter for 20 volts. Okay, black on the outside, red on the inside. Test the voltage. And we are getting 15.64 volts, which I think is normal. According to this, yes, 16 volts. If you notice me showing the camera and then moving it around to another spot, that's because I have two cameras here and it's hard to get them both pointing in the same direction. I have one recording in HD, which I'm going to post on Vimeo.com, and then the second one is for the live broadcast. So when you see me switching around like that, I'm just showing both cameras a close-up of what I'm doing. By the way, guys, I want to just announce this now. The laptop repair I did on the gateway that I posted up on the page at podnuts.com/laptop videos. If you've watched it on its early stages, you'll notice that every time I show a close-up, I don't show it to the HD camera. I only show it to the webcam. And you miss a lot of the important stuff. Well, I stayed up for hours and hours and hours last night fixing that. So if you watch that video now, every time I show a close-up, you're going to see a picture-in-picture of the actual close-up that you need to see. So it's all enclosed in one video, and it should be a lot more informative instead of probably annoying like it was probably before. So watch that video again if you watched it the first time, and you'll get to see all the zoomed-in footage. Alright, so we're going to assume that the AC adapter is okay, even though it's cracked. Let's plug it into the computer and see what happens here. Okay, here's the power button. Nothing. No lights, no nothing, nothing, nothing. Okay, so his diagnosis was correct. Okay, let me get a little piece of foam here. I'm getting a piece of foam because I'm going to turn the computer upside down and I want to scratch it. Let's get the battery out first thing. There's a release lever there. There it comes. Let's take a look at the battery, see if there's any corrosion or anything. No. You look right in here, see if there's any corrosion. Nothing. Looks okay. Well, in my experience with this type of laptop, because I've worked on a few like this, I believe there's a ribbon cable, okay, that goes from the power button, then does like one of these moves and attaches in somewhere around here in the computer. And that ribbon cable might just be disconnected. That might be the only problem. So that's what I'm going to try to see. It's not going to be easy because this thing, you have to take it completely apart to get that ribbon cable, I believe. But let's just go for it. Here's where I go crazy unscrewing things. I am an unscrewing madman here. First thing I want to do is just get any extra components out of the machine. You know, the live feed looks a little blurry. Let me see if I can focus it for you guys a little bit. Is that better? That's good enough for now. Is it blurry for you guys? Let me know in the chat room there. Ustreamer says, can I test using a power pack without the battery and testing the battery? Can I test using the power pack without the battery and testing the battery? Yeah, I'll try it. Just for kicks. Let's plug it in without the battery in there and see what happens. Nope, same problem. It might also be that even though that power pack is putting out the proper voltage, that it's not putting out enough amps. Maybe because since it's cracked a little bit, maybe it's damaged, not putting out enough amps, which would, in fact, not power the machine. So I think, I have a hunch it's this ribbon cable, guys, so that's what I'm going for. Sometimes you just got to go on your gut with these things. Okay, taking out the wireless card now. It seemed like it was in there kind of funny. Okay, maybe it's because of this rubber thing. This is one of those new smaller PCIe wireless cards. It was fitting in there a little funny. Let me just try it without the wireless card in. You never know. We'll try it all along the way here. Still no power. Let's keep going. It could be bad RAM. Let's pull the RAM out. try it again. What the heck? I've seen RAM cause computers not to boot before. Like that. Alright, now how can we get to that ribbon cable? Well, we might be able to get to it from here. You'll see there's a little spot of 3 screws there. And we're going to take that and unscrew that and see what's under there. This job might not be as tough as I originally thought. Right, Al, that's what I'm trying to see. The on-off button might not be connected to the motherboard. Okay, that came out, little plastic piece. Put that off to the side, and here's the ribbon cable I was talking about. Let's take a look here. There's the ribbon cable I was talking about. Because that is the power button right there. Power button's right here. Here's the other end of the ribbon cable. And all I did was pull that circuit board out. I just pulled out the circuit board with the ribbon cable attached to it. And we're just going to mess around with this for a little bit. Let's see if that ribbon cable is loose anywhere. At both ends. And it looks actually like it's fastened okay here. And it looks like it's fastened okay there. And then you'll see right here, that's where it goes into the motherboard. So that still might not be attached properly. Let me see if I can still get a little bit better focus on the webcam here, guys, for you. Yeah, that's as good as we're going to get on the webcam. Alright. Well, with this out, let me try powering it on again. And then manually just pressing the power button, which is right here, on this little circuit board. Nothing. Still getting nothing. Well, that goes half of my theory. This is a Sony Vaio PCG4J1L. Now I'm just looking at things here. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that's going to jump out at me that's really noticeable about the problem here. Nothing's really jumping out at me like there's any real major out points here. Alright, let's take it all the way apart here. See if there's anything we see. Gonna take it all the way. Oh, here's another thing too, by the way. These ribbon cables, see, they're bended in like at 90-degree angles in places. If they keep bending at these folds here, they break the connection on the inside. It might be that this ribbon cable's a little broken. So one way to test that is take your voltmeter and test for continuity along the cable. You just basically take one lead, put it on one end of your LCD or the ribbon cable, and then you touch the exact pin on the other end of the cable and see if you get a beep. Let's try that. Okay, let me test one end here. Yep, that side works. Let's try the other side. That side works. Okay, the cable seems like it's intact, so we're going to rule that out. Let's just put that off to the side for now and just take this whole thing completely apart. Okay. Let's go for it. Start unscrewing things. Like I said, make a note of where the screws go. I'm putting them in a little pile that works for me. I know where they're going. I've taken apart similar laptops like this before, so I know which screws go where. But if you're taking it apart for the first time, position the screws as you take them out. As you take them out, position them so you know which hole you took them out of, so you can put them back in the right spot. See, right now all those screws I took out of the bottom here are exactly the same size. And they all have a little arrow here. So as long as I have a hole with an arrow, I know they're all the same size, so I'm going to keep them in that one pile. And there's also these little rubber nubs here. Sometimes there's screws under those kind of things. So let's pull them off and see if there's a screw under there. Okay, no screw under there. Just put it back. And I think we got most of the screws out from the bottom, so let's see if the top will come off now. Well, actually, I think these won't, because the keyboard screws under the keyboard. Now, how do you get the keyboard off? There's two little latches, maybe a few more. There's two little latches. You just got to hit it with a screwdriver. Keyboard should pop right up. Okay, got one of the latches, and then how come I do not see another one? I just see one. Well, one latch was holding the whole keyboard in. Keyboard's coming out now. Take that out. There is two latches, the other one was just pushed in. It's going to be real hard to see it on the cameras, but right here and right here are two little latches that when you push the keyboard down, they snap the keyboard in. So you just got to push them out a little bit. What do we got here? This is actually the wireless card here. This thing I took out under here might be a WAN card. Probably a WAN card. Alright, let's pop this thing out. This wireless card out. Aha! I see the problem. I see the problem. Jack, we solved it. Pretty sure. Okay, look right here. There is a ribbon cable right there that's not connected. It's right there. I'm trying to get it in view here. That ribbon cable is not connected to the motherboard. And that ribbon cable is this ribbon cable, which attaches to this circuit board, which has the power button on it. Let's connect everything back up. First thing I'm going to do is start putting the screws back in off the bottom here, because that's the problem. That is the problem. That was the problem. Aren't we smart, guys? We figured that all out on our own. Yeah, Al, I had a hunch. Al, that was it. So I'm just going to start screwing these things back together. I couldn't have done it without you guys. Reliant. Without your support. Without you guys there, you know, honing my concentration into the task at hand, I don't know if I could have done this. Alright, well let's first plug that in. Now, like I said, these go at 90-degree angles. You don't want to break this cable. It's very, very much a pain in the butt if you bend these cables in half and the connection does not make the connection anymore. So, I'm just going to be real careful here. You guys won't be able to see exactly what I'm doing, but just know that I'm being careful here doing something. Okay, it's in. It's in. Now, let's just, since we got it halfway apart, let's put the circuit board back here and test it out. Make sure it powers on before we seal the whole thing up. Mark is asking why that connection would come loose. Well, Mark, he actually did a repair in this thing, and he probably forgot. I'm just saying he probably did. I'm not going to say exactly what happened, but if I had to guess, he probably, when he was taking the wireless card out and putting it back in, unconnected that cable for some reason and forgot to put it back. So, okay. I know you guys can't see exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just attaching this ribbon cable to another circuit board like it originally was. Okay, that's connected tight. That's connected tight. Let's put this plastic piece back on to protect the ribbon cables. Make sure everything's in properly. Snapped in right there. Okay, I think there's a little piece here just flitting around. Let me get that out of there. Yeah. So I want to make sure everything's I'm very, I guess you could say, anal about making sure everything's perfect before I put things back, because I don't want to take them apart again. There's nothing worse than doing a job and then getting everything all back together and then realizing you missed something and you have to take it apart again. And I can attest that there's nothing worse, because I've done that so many times that I know. And I will continue probably to do it, but I urge you to try not to do it. Alright, I can show you some close-ups now. Okay, I just screwed that little plastic piece back on there. It's back together. And the ribbon cable in question was that mama right there. And that is put back on. So let's power it up. First, let's make sure these connectors aren't hitting something they're not supposed to. These are just the cables, the antennas for the wireless card. Make sure there's no short circuits anywhere, nothing, no loose cables hanging out anywhere. There's actually a loose cable here. Let me just pull that out first. This is another antenna off of the wireless card. Okay, they're loosely in the air now. So let's just turn it powered on. Okay, moment of truth, guys. Here we go. There's a lot of glare there. You're not going to be able to see it on the webcam. Let me tilt it. Okay, here we go. You see that green light? That's powering on, man. I'm just going to power it on real quick. Power it off real quick. And then put the whole thing back together and then test it. And we'll let it boot up completely. Yes, Ustreamer, I do motherboard level repairs. If you look at the first video, gateway power jack repair, that's down to the motherboard level. But I don't repair motherboards too much. Usually when a motherboard's fried, it's fried on a laptop. I replace them. Okay, now this is the wireless card that goes here. Let's pull these up. Get that wireless card in there. Push it back down. Okay, that's in there. Let's put the keyboard back on. That snaps in there. Just want to make sure it's in there fully. Snap back down. Okay, it looks like it's in there okay. Let me just put this keyboard in. Slide it in the bottom first, and the top will snap down. It should. It really should snap down. Let me close that, and then there's one screw that's holding the keyboard in that goes right here. Let's put that in and fasten the keyboard in. Keyboard's in. This I assume is a WAN card. It might be Bluetooth. I think it's WAN. Goes into a PCI slot down here, PCIe slot. And there's two little screws holding that in. Okay. Hook the wires back up to that, and I'll show you guys a close-up of that. Okay, that was the WAN card right there. And you just put the two antennas back on it. And kind of just tuck them in the way they should be tucked in there. Okay, that's good enough. Nice and tucked in. Put the cover back on that. And we got two more pieces left, and then the second moment of truth. We'll test that again. Make sure everything's Make sure everything's good. You know, one thing you can do if you suspect your RAM slot's bad, you know, get like a clean end of a toothbrush. Just, you know, do one of these in there. Get out any debris that you think's in there. Push that baby down. And then put the memory cover on. Aha. I'm like, what was I missing here? Goes there. Screw that back on. Let's put the battery in. I suspect the battery's just fine. Snap in this, out of here. Plug the adapter in. Hit the power button and celebrate. In this video, we're going to be doing a power jack repair on a Dell B130 laptop. First thing I want to do here is check the power adapter cord, make sure the cord is okay. A lot of times cords come in and they could be frayed, they could be bent, the pins could be messed up. So I take the voltmeter here and I set it to 20 volts because typically a laptop power adapter is 18 volts. And you're going to see I take the black tip and I put it on the outside of the pin, and I take the red tip and I put it on the inside of the pin, and I'm bending the cord around here to make sure that it's making a connection. You can see it was 19 volts, and that's correct, so we know the cord is okay at this point. The outside of the tip of the power adapter is usually negative, which is black, and the inside is usually positive, which is red, so that's why I did it that way. Now I'm testing to see if I jiggle the cord around in here, does it actually make the laptop go on or give it power? I want to just determine if it really is the power jack that's bad or not. And I'm bending and bending and it's still giving it no power. Now I know the power adapter's good, so therefore it's telling me that the jack is bad in the laptop, or it could be another motherboard problem. So we're going to open it up and see what's going on in there. I usually put a piece of foam down when I'm working on laptops just so I don't scratch the surface when I flip them over. That piece of foam is from, if you buy a motherboard, normal like MATX motherboard, that's usually the piece of foam that comes in the box, and they're great for working on laptops in this case. Now what I want to do is start taking out components. Like you see, I just pulled the battery out. Now I'm going to pull the RAM out, the wireless card out. Then I'm going to pull the hard drive out as well. Now the reason I do this is I want to get everything out of the way. See, I'm going to be working on the motherboard. So anything that's attached to the motherboard or touching the motherboard that's going to be loose, I want to get it out. So the first thing I do when I do a power jack repair is I just take all the components that I can out of the computer. Now in this case, there's a little flap there. You see I lifted that flap up. It revealed the heatsink, which sits on top of the processor, so I could take that off as well. Sometimes you can't get to the heatsink until you open up the laptop all the way. And you'll see the processor sitting there under it. I'm going to pull off the wireless card. And I'll tell you a little bit later why it's really important to get the wireless card out of there. And then one screw, pull out that one screw and the CD drive comes out. Laptops. The key to working on laptops is, in my opinion, to get the motherboard out, you want to get the screen and the keyboard off first. And the key to getting the screen and the keyboard off is to remove that flap, that tab, that piece of plastic that sits right above the keyboard you saw me trying to pry open. Sometimes it's screwed in from the bottom. So I don't know if it's screwed in from the bottom or not in this computer, but I'm going to be taking all the screws out anyway, so I might as well pull out all the screws that appear to be under that plastic piece, just in case there is a screw holding it in. Then I'm going to pry it open just with a screwdriver. You'll see a lot of Dells on the right hand side. There's a little tab there. You put a screwdriver in, it pulls it right up. Sometimes you got to get right under the hinge there. That's a good way to do it with a flathead screwdriver. And if the end is a little tricky to get off, I hit it again with the flathead screwdriver right under the hinge. Usually pops right off. Now don't force that. If you have to force it, there's probably screws holding it in. And then we got two screws holding the keyboard in here. Once those two screws are out, the keyboard should flop right up. Now what I'm doing is recharging my screwdriver magnetically. That's just a magnet that came out of a speaker or something, I believe. And when I lose a magnetic charge on my screwdriver, which I like to have to pull out screws, I just rub it up against that magnet and it recharges the screwdriver. Now the keyboard's going to flop up and over, and you have to pop that ribbon cable off, and there goes the keyboard. This is the LCD cable. After I get the keyboard out, I like to get the screen out of the way. A screen's a very delicate part of the computer, so let's get it out of the way so we don't mess it up when we're trying to get to the motherboard. So you want to pull out any connectors that are attached to the motherboard. This could be ribbon cables, this could be battery connections, this could be like trackpad connections, which I'm pulling out here. You don't want any of those ribbon cables attached to the motherboard, because when we pull the top plate off, those ribbon cables might rip if they're still attached. Now, in this particular computer, it's a little out of the frame. Okay, we're going to put it in. There's two screws holding the monitor in. These screw right into the hinges, and it keeps the monitor screwed right into the hinges. Now again, on this computer, you see I'm kind of recklessly throwing the screws into a pile. There's no particular way I'm taking them out because they're all labeled on this particular Dell. You can tell the size of the screws by the label next to the screw hole, which is great and if the computer offers that. A lot of Dells do, Toshiba does. And so now that the screen's off, we're just going to start unscrewing every screw that's holding the top plate on and the bottom plate on, because we want to get to that motherboard. If we could get to the power jack at this point straight on, I wouldn't have to do this step, but the power jack is hidden in between the two, the top and bottom cover, so we have to get them off to get to the power jack. Now I'm just pulling every screw, every place I see a screw hole, I'm taking that screw out of the bottom case. Now I'm not touching any screws on the motherboard itself, just the screws that are screwed into the case. Just going to give it a check there and make sure I got them all, and then make sure I got the same ones done on the top. And if the case comes apart as easy as that, then you know you got them all. Now we're going to take a look at the power jack here and see what's going on. I'm putting that screwdriver in the power jack hole there to shake the pin around. Now the pin inside the power jack may be loosely attached to the motherboard, and that's why you're not getting a connection. Now mind you, that cord, the power adapter cord, is not plugged in right now to the outlet, to the wall, so doesn't have power. And you'll see that that center pin, the one that's actually pointing in a different direction, is loose from the motherboard. It's not actually making connection on the motherboard there. So we're going to have to resolder that point to the motherboard. And when we jiggle the power adapter, you'll be able to see that pin inside move up and down and not really be soldered strongly to the motherboard. And that's what we're going to be fixing here. So to get to that point, we got to take the motherboard out of the machine, because we need to get to the top part of the jack and we got to get to the bottom part of the jack. So we can only get to the bottom from here. So we're going to take the motherboard out of the bottom case. Now I'm unscrewing screws from the motherboard. Usually on a motherboard, if you see that white arrow I'm pointing at there, a white arrow will point to the screws that you need to take out to get the motherboard out. There's several other screws in that motherboard that I'm not taking out. Usually, it will guide you. Only the ones with the white arrows, only the screws that are next to the white arrows are the ones you should have to take out to get the whole motherboard out. So you'll see I didn't need to take the fan off or the PCMCIA slot or a couple other things, just because I followed the white arrows and just took those 4 or 5 screws out that kept the motherboard in. Now that the motherboard's out, we're going to operate here. We're going to fix that power jack using a special technique that I do. But first, since we got the motherboard out, we're going to hit it with some compressed air. That was time-lapsed right there. I actually took it outside and I blew all the air out. There's a lot of dust that accumulates in that fan, and now that you have access to it, you might as well take advantage of that and just blow it out. Okay, so I'm taking a look here, just inspecting the best way to go about attacking this problem. And I'm just going to get some materials here, like a soldering iron. That's just a typical 15-watt Radio Shack soldering iron that I'm using. And I'm going to pull some other tools out here. I'm going to get a file. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to file off a spot on the motherboard where I can reattach the power jack. See, what we're going to do is a technique that I like to do where I use a wire to reattach the power jack to the motherboard. I use a wire because it has flexibility and it won't be as brittle as attaching the actual pin from the power jack straight to the motherboard. They have a tendency, if it breaks once, it's going to have a tendency to keep breaking. So I'm going to use a technique here where I use a wire in place of the actual post, the actual pin that comes out of the center of the back of the power jack. The first thing I need to do is scuff off, file down a bare spot on that motherboard where that pin actually attaches to, where the power jack pin actually attaches to. Okay, now that that's filed down, I'm also going to attach a pin right to the back of the power jack. And then I'm going to wrap that wire from the pin down to the other underside of the motherboard and solder it at both ends. Now I'm filing this down. The reason I file it is so the solder will stick. I want to make a good solder connection because I don't want this ever to break again. There's the solder. The soldering iron should be hot enough. Now, I'm not a soldering professional, so my techniques might not be by the book, but they work for me, and that's why I'm going to show you what I do. First, I'm going to cut a piece of wire the right length to wrap from the top of the power jack around the underside of the motherboard, and which will attach to the spot that we filed out on the underside of the motherboard. And that length of wire should do it. Now what I'm going to use here is a little device called Helping Hands I got at Radio Shack. It's actually missing one of its alligator clips, so it's actually a helping hand, but it'll work for what we're doing. And all it does is it allows you to hold things while you work on them. It's like an extra set of hands. Okay, what I did there with the helping hand was solder both ends of that wire, which I didn't catch on film, but I'll show you afterwards. And then I just put a dab of solder on the back of the power jack there. On that spot I was filing, right at the back of the power jack, that pin. It's the positive point. The whole outside of that power jack, the metal on the outside is negative. That's ground, your ground connection. And my hand's in the way, but you'll see the finished product. I will hold it up to the camera. I just soldered that wire to the back of the power jack. And then I bent it around the underside of the motherboard. And now I'm going to solder it to the point that we filed down on the underside of the motherboard. Now that point on the underside of the motherboard, which right now I'm attaching, I'm just putting a little drop of solder on it. And then I'm going to just take the wire, which also has solder on the end of the wire already, which I did with the helping hands. I'm just going to melt that point onto the point of the motherboard where I just dropped a piece of solder. Now that point on the motherboard that we filed earlier, you need to make sure that that point is the exact spot that the pin from the power jack actually connects to on the motherboard. You can't just connect it to any spot on the motherboard. It has to be, you have to find out where that pin on the power jack goes to on the motherboard, and then you have to attach the solder or the wire to that point, which you'll see right there. Now I'm going to freeze frame that. Now notice that wire is attached to the motherboard right where that pin comes through the underside of the motherboard. It's essentially the same contact point. That's very important. You could tell it's the same contact point because of the light green color. Well, now that that's connected, and we tested with the pliers to make sure it was a strong connection, the soldering is essentially done. Give it a little tug, make sure it's secure. And you'll see that basically what we're doing here is bypassing the pin for the power jack with the wire. It's better to use a wire, in my opinion, because of the flexibility, like I said before. Now what we're going to do is clear off the desk a little bit and start to put everything back together. Put the soldering iron away, put the helping hands, wires away, files away. Now that you have the motherboard out, hit it with some compressed air. Now's your chance to make sure the motherboard is clean. It's fully exposed. You might as well take that opportunity and clean it up a little bit. And we're going to take the bottom case, we're going to slip the motherboard back in. Take out my trusty paintbrush here and just paint the dust off of the... It's just a bare paintbrush, never been touched by paint. And we're going to just take the dust off of the bottom case with the paintbrush. Okay, you want to make sure you get the motherboard lined up properly. And if you notice anything else on the motherboard that you need to do before you put it in, now's the time. And what I'm doing now is, as I was eyeing it up, I saw that there might be some metal in the bottom part of the case that might hit that wire that we just attached. So I'm going to take a piece of electrical tape, maybe two, and cover up the exposed wire that we just attached, just in case there's a ground point on the bottom part of the case that would hit it and cause a short circuit. So we're basically insulating the job we did. Now we have to do that sometimes because using the wire, because that's not what was originally in the machine, it might jut out a little bit and make contact with a piece of metal, you know, in the bottom case or somewhere else in the machine. Make sure you get it in exactly right. It should fit in exactly right. There shouldn't be any points that are forced upwards or bent. It should fit in perfectly. If it's not, find out why. Like for this example, there's a connector that's under there that needs to come up on the upper side of the motherboard rather than sitting on the underside of the motherboard. And once it's in there solidly, it's time to screw the screws back in. And remember, the screws go where the white arrows are. Okay, we're going to make sure all the screws are in. I'm just being very careful here. This is the point where you have to be careful. You're using all the original screws. So when you get the whole thing back together, you're not left with some stray screws, which has happened to me often in the beginning. Now I'm going to take more electrical tape and do the same thing to the underside of the motherboard as I did with the top part we did. Just cover up that contact point that we created. Just because with the wire there, it might be jutting out or popping out a little bit higher than was originally there with the original solder connection. So we just want to be extra careful. Because as you can see, the whole top of this upper case is metal. And if that positive red wire that we just attached, which is the positive in the circuit, touches that metal, which is ground, which is negative, we're going to create a short circuit. So you really don't want that to happen. So just if you feel the least bit apprehensive about it, cover up your work with electrical tape. You'll be okay. Okay, we just want to make sure this lines up exactly, and it should snap right in. I'm going to pull that one wire through, which is actually the wireless card wire. Just make sure that's in the right spot. pull it up and through. There it is. The whole case snaps back on. And there's my pile of screws. Time to just put them all back. And what I'm actually going to do is speed up the recording here, because you saw how I took it apart. Use the same screws to put it back together. You don't need to watch it in real time. It would probably get a little boring. And very important, as you can see what I was doing there, attach all the ribbon cables that you unattached in the beginning. Like the ribbon cable that goes to the touchpad. That needs to attach to the motherboard. And any other ribbon cables that are there. It would be really nice if I could work this fast in real time, wouldn't it? Put the heatsink back on. Now I screw the heatsink in a cross pattern, like you're putting on a tire. You don't want to put too much pressure on one side of the heatsink and hurt your processor. So put it on a couple turns here, a couple turns there, just like you're putting on a tire. That's how I put heatsinks back on the processors. Put your wireless card in, put the hard drive in, put the RAM back in, put the covers back on, and we're almost done here. Make sure you get all the screws in, put the CD drive in, held in by one screw. Get the screen back on. Attach the LCD cable, attach the wireless card cable, which is basically an antenna that the screen usually has an LCD cable and the wireless card cable coming through it. And that wireless card cable goes to the top of the screen to provide an antenna. Attach all the ribbon cables. Now these screws I'm screwing in now are actually holding in the hinges of the screen. I couldn't put these in until I actually had the screen in, otherwise there would be no threads. The hinges actually have the threads in them. And now that that's tight, put the keyboard back on. Make sure it's attached properly. Put the two screws on that hold the keyboard on. Then snap that panel back into place, which we know doesn't have any screws holding it in from the bottom. We know that now. Make sure it's in tight. Make sure that it fits in exactly how it was when you first took it apart. And there you have it. Now let's test it out. Plug the power adapter in. Before we do that, it's actually a good idea to test if there's a short circuit in your work before you plug the power adapter in, because you don't want to mess anything up. So I'm taking the red there, I'm attaching it to the center pin of the power jack, and that black connection is actually hitting a ground point on the other side of the computer, which you can't see. And if I hear a beep on my power meter, that will indicate a short circuit, and then I know I did something wrong. I have to take the whole thing apart. It would have been smart to test this before I put the whole thing back together, but I'm getting cocky now in my work, so sometimes I put it all together knowing that it's just going to work. Plug the power adapter in, and we're going to take a look down at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there. You're going to see that the light comes on. It powers on. This is with no battery, so we know that it's working. And that's how you do it. A power jack repair on a Dell B130 laptop.
Thank you for watching. Please like the video and share it to your media communities. And kindly subscribe to my channel. God bless.